We did it, guys. We have a mirrorless camera that there's nothing else we need in it, including a monitor that no longer gets in the way of your audio ports, no matter where you're spinning and placing it. Now, I'm not gonna sit here and pretend that there isn't other cameras out there that do raw internal, open gate, and a variety of things that the Sony camera, this FX5, does. But there's a few things that the FX5 does that no one else is doing, including this beautiful EVF, which I'm excited about because it's gonna force a lot of filmmakers to finally shoot at eye level, which is where your camera should be 90% of the time with your subject. I had the pleasure of shooting this with Gareth Edwards, director of Creator. We went to 3 different countries, to some amazing locations, so I really got to put this through the paces, including shooting in like 47 Celsius, 100% humidity, and also then on top of a mountain in -2 Celsius. So let's go over what's new in this camera, and then also kind of what I experienced as a field test and what I've been liking about it, and maybe perhaps some areas still left for improvement. But yeah, let's jump into this. This is the FX5. First, let's jump into what is new with this, because most of us are going to compare this to the FX3. Now, Sony's trying to say that this isn't a competitor to the FX3, which I would push back and say it's absolutely a direct competitor to the FX3, even if this is more expensive. A lot of people who are going up to that price of the FX3 are just going to be considering the FX5, and it's tough not to want to get there. And they're even saying that this kind of places below the FX6 in terms of the pricing structure and what they expect consumers want to do, and just above the FX3. That said, anyone who's going to be buying an FX6 who doesn't completely prioritize audio as their main thing or internal ND will be thinking likely that they might just want to go with the FX5. It's tough when there is more horsepower under the hood in a camera. I just know the mentality of most filmmakers out there. They'll want to go for that, especially when there's raw internal. It's tough to be like, oh, do I need that? Which you don't really always need that. I just shot an entire feature in X-AVC-I 422 and we used our POWERGRADE and it looks just fine. But having internal raw is really reassuring, just to be able to know that you can recover highlights and have that full fidelity of the camera. This also now has open gate. I've never desired that too much, but now that I'm shooting more anamorphic, I absolutely love the open gate. It allows you to get a frame that is less cropped. You get more of the native resolution. So when you're de-squeezing, you're not going to a crazy like 2:6:6 format, I believe is what you get in terms of aspect ratio when you use 16:9 sensors. But with the 3.2, you're getting down to a 2.25. So it crops really nicely for your 2.35. So it's just nice to have more resolution and not have a crazy frame, especially if you're gonna be shooting 2 times anamorphics. At that open gate too, you're gonna be able to shoot 120 frames per second. And with firmwares that they're gonna be releasing, I'm told that they're gonna get up to 240 at 4K crop. I don't know how much of that crop is. I know in the FX9, which I'm recording this, it was always like a 10% crop. So we'll see what that does, but 240 frames, not bad. I typically only ever need 120, 240 is really just for elements I find like water or really, really intense action. My early camera tests between the FX5 and the FX3 were identical. And maybe I should just do a whole video about that, but we did not see a difference in the image. Maybe the FX5 was a little bit sharper, and that might have been some of the general default settings. I'm using a version 1 firmware on this. So looking at the images really quickly, it felt like it was maybe a tiny bit sharper, but overall, identical. The color science is the same. You can integrate this in. You will not see a difference. So for those of you out there with an FX3 feeling immediate camera envy, you still have a very beautiful, completely usable, of course, image. Stunning. The FX3 still delivers. I shot that project with Gareth with the FX6 so extensively, and it integrated perfectly with the FX5. Your cameras are not dead. What are the main features of this that are new compared to every other camera? Well, we have now 3 ISOs finally. Sony has caught up with Canon in that regard. You have 800, 4000, and the 12800. So nice having that 4000, having that ISO in the middle. I think that's where a lot of people just might leave it and be throwing ND on that, because the 4000 is still very sensitive for low light, but then it's also very usable in daylight if you have enough ND. For the most part though, I shot about 90% at 800. And now Sony has a new dual gain where it's combining both the 4800 and they claim that it's a lot less noisy in the shadows. I haven't done extensive tests, but that's what they're giving you the option. So I think a bunch of the times I did just shoot the dual gain, but I haven't gone in and analyzed it. But it's nice to know that you will have a cleaner option if you shoot that dual gain ISO. And allegedly that dual gain also expands the dynamic range in those shadows. So you can recover more and have a cleaner shadows. It'd be great to see some tests on that. Now, the big feature, if there was one defining feature to me that separated this from any other camera below the Venice and Burano and all that, it's that we now finally have OCN, which is original camera negative, which is Sony's term for RAW. Now, this goes up to the LT format. It doesn't have like the ST and XT that you would see in the Venice, but what's great about the LT is it's the same bit rate as XAVC 422, I believe. It's around that. The files aren't ginormous. I shot for 8 days and shot a lot, including interviews, and my total footage count, both the FX6 and this, was under 3 terabytes. Which if you think for like an 8-day documentary shoot where I was rolling a lot, it's pretty good. You can fit that onto most hard drives. The OCN LT is 60% smaller than the XT, so you're getting a really tight package, fairly compressed RAW on here, but it's still 16-bit, and from what we've seen using our POWERGRADE, we've been able to get a ton of recovery from those highlights, and there was no real limitation, although I wasn't doing a direct comparison to the XT, but let's be honest, I don't think most filmmakers are gonna need that. People become mesurebators, they get really intense about the specs of your camera. I've really never been complaining about XAVCI 422 except when there's highlights, because I just know it's tough to recover that 95% kind of range. So this is giving you a little bit more. I've experienced pulling back those highlights and recovering that, but I'm totally fine so far from what we've experienced on the stock shoot using that LT format. Now there is like a C1 and a C2. I didn't go there with those compressions on the OCN, but I guess he's retired, but I was gonna say Gerald is gonna do some tests on that. We need another person to do camera tests.
Mark Bone, leave me alone.
And if you're wanting to shoot a documentary, maybe a branded content piece, or even your first short film, we have a few free resources down below, courtesy of The Art of Documentary. We have our interview question guide. This is an in-depth guide of questions you can use when you're making your films or corporate pieces. They'll give you a spark for things that will help you get to the bottom of a good story. And we also have our most popular resource, our interview lighting guide, that will give you the complete setups to get the most cinematic look out of your interviews. And this is all part of The Art of Documentary. That's our course and academy. You're gonna be hearing me talk a lot about AOD this summer because we've been adding a ton of new content to it in prep for our next launch. There's only a few times a year that we open the doors. That'll be in September. We are even including a full new course about short films, the blueprint to that, because we have a very exciting announcement coming up in a few weeks about one of our films. But if you wanna get on our wait list, this is how you can register and save your seat. We have a link down below so that you can make sure you get the best price possible. Save that seat for when the doors open. Our documentary is the community course and academy that you've been waiting for if you're not a part of it. We have thousands of students and thousands of testimonies about how AOD has impacted people's career. You can go check us out on Instagram to find out more, but make sure to grab one of those resources. I should also disclaim that Sony did pay me to do that documentary with Gareth, but this video, they don't get to see any of this. This is my opinion, and so I get to kind of say what I want on this. This is separate from that video. There's a lot of new AI-based autofocus. As you can tell, I often use cinema lenses, so I'm not always interested in that, but when I was using this lens here, the 16-35, for all of my gimbal work, I found that the focus was great. It was very smart. It locked on to Gareth and wouldn't make crazy choices. There's a ton of new features with that AI, like a bird mode, bird priority. If your priorities in life are birds, I'm jealous. I feel like that's where I'll go in retirement. Now, another little feature Sony quietly added to this is 32-bit audio and what they call high-resolution audio. That's kind of their ecosystem. I'm just really excited about the 32-bit, especially with the top handle. This, with the XLR inputs here, you can get 3 pieces of audio in. You also have this little mini jack up here. I love when companies are not sacrificing on audio. The biggest complaint I would have is I would still love to see one of these top handles with a hot shoe up here so that you can have that additional Sony mic pack. When I'm shooting on my FX6, I have 2 XLRs coming in and then that mic pack for my subjects. So I usually get 3 lavs and a shotgun, and for documentary work, I sometimes need that. The second there's 3 people, I need 3 lavs. And so if you don't have a sound person, it's great to be able to do that into camera. I would love to see Sony incorporate that finally on here. Like, let me do the XLR. You have 4 channels of audio. Why can't I add 2 more channels up here? So if Sony's watching this, which I'm sure they will be, please add that to a future top handle. Now, one of my favorite features was a dedicated false color. Now, I loved having that. That was just so nice to just be quickly looking at exposure. I am a big evangelist for false colors over waveforms. Waveforms are accurate, I have nothing against them, except that you have to then look down and refer to what part of your image is actually clipping. For false colors, it's just the quickest way to quickly glance and see your exposure. I'm just so surprised that so many people don't use it, but I love seeing that there's a dedicated button there. My complaint with it is I just want the small HD false colors. I don't care for this version. This version is actually quite bizarre because the gray makes no sense to me in false colors. It shouldn't be anywhere on a false color. That's a whole other video. Just give me the small HD false colors. They are the most easy to read. I hate anything that looks like the ARRI false colors. They're ridiculous. We'll get to the camera body in just a sec. I want to talk a little bit more about menus and the recording formats. I know what a lot of people are going to say right away is things like the more recent camera, the Canon R6V. Is that a 5? Is that R32? I forget the name of that one. But that, I think, went all the way up to 7K internally. Very cool to have that much resolution. This caps out at 5K. And that's cool. You may call me a Sony bro for being like, well, that's all that you need, but I've never actually needed more resolution. I mean, films like The Substance were delivered in a 2K DI and then sometimes up-resed for certain 4K projections. 4K is plenty enough. I mean, up until just a year ago, all my YouTube videos were 1080 and I would just up-res them to 4K. It's just easier format to send those files to my editors. Resolution measure baiting to me is hilarious because it's usually people who just aren't shooting projects or saying you need it for VFX and just aren't doing VFX. I feel like a lot of people complain about cameras. In the metaphor I would use is it's like a bunch of people gathering around a car engine complaining that it doesn't do certain things, like, oh, it should be a V12, but then they never get in the car and drive it. I've just never experienced on any of my docs, not one person has ever mentioned, we wish this was more than 4K. Maybe 6K would be nice if you need to punch in and move around on your interviews, but why not just nail your framing on set? Make a decision there. Sony's claiming too a really simple timecode syncing that you can actually take a B&C cable and they're gonna have one then that converts to USB-C. So you can just plug it in here. There's 2 USB-Cs right here. I love hearing that. It's really nice just to jam sync. This is a B camera to something like an FX6, or is anyone shooting on the FX9 anymore? But you can jam sync this now with that cable. I love hearing that. Time code in is so important. It's really overlooked, and it's just a simple way of keeping everything locked in. Now, talking about menus, this menu is like the Venice. I haven't shot much on the Venice myself, but this is more like what you would see on those cameras. It's really easy to use. You can quickly jump in here, change the ISO, go here. I just like keeping my camera simple. I don't need to jump between ISOs. I just want to shoot with native, because if you're jumping between ISOs, you're just adding gain or reducing gain. And that's something I want to do in post. I want that control. I don't like to do that in camera. So I shoot natively 800, 4000, 12,800. I don't mess with the EI settings. If I ever notice that it's off, I'd actually go back and I will adjust with my aperture or my ND filters. Of course, not having an internal ND is always going to be a little bit of a bummer, but I watched Gareth on set. He would just use an adapter on his PL where he'd slide NDs in and out, and then he could actually adjust those. I used threaded NDs on the front. Of course, sometimes you get a bit of vignetting. It's a small sacrifice to have this in such a small body. Nothing beats being on your FX6 and being able to dial that ND in there. That's really nice, but you can just slap one on the front. And I always carry a 2:5 and a 6:9 because in bright sunlight, if you're shooting anything faster than 2.8, even at 2.8, you kind of need to get up to an ND6 at that point, as a little rule of thumb. And it's nice having NDs that are broken up in that 2:5 to 6:9 so you don't get the crazy vignetting. A little feature that I actually really appreciated in this is I was shooting proxies because I needed to get my editor working right away. The FX6, when you shoot 60 frames like S and Q, it wouldn't create a proxy, which is a bit of a hassle because then I'm having to send the full res files or go track down when I was shooting slow motion. It's just a big time waste in post, but this would actually, from my experience, create proxies even when I would shoot off speed, which is really nice just to be able to grab all of those proxies and send them to my editor. I think in the end, the proxies it created, the eyepiece, it's great. It's nice, like I mentioned, because it gets you up here, or you're gonna be shooting just off your chest, forces you to shoot eye level. And actually, eyepieces really keep your shot stable, because now you have 3 points of contact, and they force you to push it up against your body, so you're gonna have a really still shot. My only complaint is I have glasses. It would be nice to have like a really bigger cup, but that's gonna be a third-party thing. Sony told me they will not be adding in additional cups. And I haven't mentioned it, but here's my FX6. Can you just remember how bad this was? The fact that you couldn't even twist the monitor when you had your audio door out, like it would hit the door. Even the recent Canon cameras and the ZR that I use from Nikon, they all jam up against the cables here. But it feels like Sony was finally one of the first people to listen to us. I think there's one other camera. You let me know what camera that actually does this, but this is the first camera I've ever used with LCD that goes in every direction and also has the tilt up. Now, talking about some other physical aspects of this, we have the dedicated HDMI, which is nice and far over here. It's not going to be getting in the way of anything. 2 dedicated USB-Cs on the side here, and then an Ethernet. Maybe that's a broadcast thing, or maybe you can get like really great internet on here and put a keyboard in. You can be surfing the web, be on Netscape, checking out your new Winamp downloads, playing some Mini Putt 2. One big addition to this is a new battery. It's so funny, I won't lie, like I had a couple shots I needed to use on the FX3 on that doc I just did with Gareth. And it was like going back to the FX3, it was like, yeah, I know I said it doesn't really matter, but it's just the monitor. It just immediately felt like an older camera. This battery, I don't know the power output, but apparently because of all the new processing and the new fans and having 2 monitors and all the extra stuff that the camera's using, and I think mostly because of the AI processing, it has to be on a new battery. So now it lasted quite some time. Like I could go, felt like over 2 hours, where this maybe in the past would get me like a little bit less. It wasn't like a huge, like significant feeling, but this feels it's just a little bit heavier, which usually indicates a little more power. I used all ProGrade cards on this. They worked great. Of course, Sony has to always have the disclaimer that it cannot guarantee the media, but I find ProGrade has been extremely reliable. I know people use Angelbird and some other ones, and there's been issues that way. So I can absolutely fully verify and endorse ProGrade. I used exclusively ProGrade cards and SSDs on this. I know there's things like the Crucial cards, and my apologies to the audience. I endorsed those in the past, Crucial, and they have failed me. They've absolutely failed me. And so now that I'm far away from that, I want to just say I do not endorse Crucial. I can, in my experience so far, can fully say that ProGrade has been very safe to use. Final thing is this scroll wheel, and I really liked this. It was much nicer using this because it also had a click in. So where on the FX3, you just have this dial, and then you got to go down here to this dial. They've actually gotten rid of this dial, which is nice because we've acquired a lot more space on the back. You're kind of with the FX5 here, it's just all screen, which is really all you need because it's like the screen is a touch screen. It should be the menu. We're kind of gotten rid of all these dials, and I will always take a bigger monitor over more buttons, except in cars. I hate the new BMWs with all screen. Cars need buttons, but cameras need screens.
That's well said.
This is a really exciting time for filmmaking, and I actually think it's gonna be a confronting time for filmmakers because the cameras that are all being released, there's nothing else that we need them to do. We're just complaining at this point. We're finding things to be so nitpicky about. What really comes down is what is in front of your camera now. What are you shooting? What story are you telling? And why I think this is a really exciting moment in filmmaking is the technology is so strong right now. The only thing that's gonna differentiate what you shoot from others is the stories you're telling. Pick up any one of these cameras that's released and go focus on what you're creating. Put your energy towards your storytelling. That will benefit you the most. Truly, talking about tech is the least interesting part of filmmaking. Love to hear if you disagree with me on any of this. This is definitely gonna become one of my go-to cameras. I'll still likely use my FX6 a lot for my documentary work, just when I need that audio. But this is gonna become a B camera, maybe like an AB camera, like right between, like a A.5, if that makes sense.
That doesn't make sense.
And I'm sure there'll be times where I'll just throw the top handle on this and shoot with this instead of my FX6. I hate goodbyes, but I love fiber. It's the new protein. See you on the next one.